All right, so let me just redo this last little bit very quickly. When there's ocean convergence, it's the older one. It's the older part of the ocean plate. But both are basalt, obviously, but the older one tends to be more dense, and so that the older one will subduct underneath the underneath the newer, less dense one. All right, so it's just that's important to point that out. And of course, you have island building there. When the ocean when the these are always about convergent boundaries. When the ocean um, plate crashes into a continental plate, then of course the ocean plate is always more dense, um, and that all the the ocean plate subducts below, and then when that happens, of course, you also have volcanic activity, um, but you're not building islands anymore. You're building, you're building mountains, but not in the oceans, but on at the coasts of the continents. Like for example, the Rocky Mountains or the Andes Mountains. All right, and of course the Andes Mountains. You have marine life that's been subducted down here, and that goes into forming that goes into the magma that goes into forming the rock, and so it's made of slightly different stuff than ordinary granite, right? So that's why it's called andesitic granite. All right, and then of course within the continents themselves, you can have this two continents converging with each other. The less dense one um, will will uh, will 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 sorry the less dense one will you know will be on top. The more dense one will sink below, and then of course you'll have mountain building, and this is the example of the for example the Himalayas, right? The Indian subcontinent is crashing into the Eurasian continent. The plate, I should say, the Indian plate is crashing into the Eurasian plate, and that's built the largest mountains in the world, right? The Himalayas. The Alps were formed in a similar way, and so were the Appalachian Mountains, right? The Alps, of course, it was the African plate crashing into um, the Eurasian plate. That's what built the Alps, and then the Appalachian plate is the um, you know well, I'd have to look at the name of the plate. But something in the North American plate were crashing. The Appalachians are very old. Like they're way older than the Rocky Mountains, for example. And in fact, that's why they're not as tall, right? There's been lots and lots of time for weathering to take place with the Andes Mountains. I'm sorry, with the not the Andes. That's Andes Mountains are actually still growing. So are the Himalayas. They're still, but like the Appalachian Mountains keep getting smaller and smaller as time goes on. Like not within our lifetimes, but over thousands and hundreds of thousands to millions of years, they're getting smaller and smaller. Because of weathering, of course. All right, so this is exactly the example I was talking about. So the India is a plate unto itself, and it crashes into Eurasia, and it's more dense than Eurasia, and it will sink down below, and that's creating the largest mountains in the world, which we of course know as the Himalayas. All right. Let's see. So this is the third type of contact between two plates that can plate boundaries that can take place, and of course that's when the two plates slip by each other. This is called a transform. A transform boundary, and so with that, what you have are these ridges that will Because the whole thing is moving over time, and the ridges will you'll see kind of like these stripes on either side of these ridges, right? So here's a good picture of it. Well, not right there. Here, let me find a good picture. Oh, it was in your textbook actually. Here, let me show you what I'm talking about. Right here. Let's see, not that. Oops, I should have already here. Let me pause. All right, so I found what I was looking for. So this is the transform boundary. It's when two continental plates are slipping past each other, but that it will create these ridges. And so here's what I was looking for. This picture right here. So this is part of the San Andreas Fault, and these are the ridges. So you get these ridges on either side of this where the boundaries are slipping past each other, right? So this is a good example of it, right? The North American plate is moving in a kind of a southeasterly direction. The Pacific plate is moving in a kind of a northwestern direction, and so they're slipping past each other, and you get these fault lines. All right, so that's a transform fault. All right, let's go back to the slide. I don't know why they didn't show you that in the slide. All right, so this is our slide from current slide. All right, so they just showed us part of it. So there are three types of stresses that are caused by the interaction between plate boundaries. You get compression stresses, where the slabs are pushed together. You get tension stresses, where the slabs are pulled apart, and shearing stresses, where they're pulled and they're pushed. That's all right. So let's take a look at that. The rocks respond in three different ways. Okay, so rocks generally they're elastic. What we mean by that is if there's a force exerted on them, either a stress or a strain that's exerted on them, they tend to when that force is taken away, they will return to their original form. All right, but just like a rubber band, right, which is elastic, there is an elastic limit to rocks, and if the elastic limit is reached, then there's breaking, or what we call brittle deformation, right? That's actual, so you've gone past the elastic limit where the rock can bounce back to its original form. And then, of course, there's what's called plastic deformation. And so this is when the rock is either stretched or compressed. All right. And so, and of course, this is the kind of thing that we were talking about in chapter 20 with metamorphic rock, right? All right. So when this kind of thing happens, there's two terms that we need to talk about. The sink line. All right, so the sink line is you got to kind of imagine this flat. This is a good picture of it. This axial plane, and so the idea with the sink line one is that the oldest material is at the bottom, right? And well, that's actually true for all of these things. The oldest material is at the bottom. The youngest is at the top. All right, so all right, so again, this comes from these folds that take place when you have these plate boundaries crashing into each other on the continents. Anyhow, so this is what's called a sink line. And so the sink line, you just imagine a plane going straight down through the center of the sink line. And if in that particular case, what's going to happen, and the way people usually remember this is, a ball on either side of a sink line would roll towards the youngest part of the plate, right? Because the youngest part is the top of the plate, right? Um, and so for these anti lines, the anticlines, as they're called, anticlines. It's hard. You got to remember to say that part. The anticlines. So the ball, like if you put a plane through through this upwelling of the earth, a ball would roll away from it would roll away from the plane, right? And so the plane itself, that's kind of the middle of it. And if you think about an axis, right? Like for the anticline, the axis would be way down here, right? The center, like imagine a big circle all the way around this thing. The center would be the oldest rock. See, layer number 1 would be the oldest rock, and then for the sink line, if you think about a circle, right? The circle going around this thing, the center of the circle is right at number 6 right here, the top layer, which is the youngest layer. All right, so that's the way to remember this stuff. Okay, so sink lines, they curve, they curve upward. That's a good way to just think of it. They curve upward in the anticline, curves downward, where the center of the anticline is the oldest rock. The center of the sink line is the youngest rock. All right, good. Let's move on. All right, so this is really important to us. So one of the things that you have is often when there's a fault, if these faults, so if they're at an incline, right? So if you were a person and you were in between this fault line, in the middle of the fault line. So if you could stand on one side of it, even if it's greatly inclined, if you could stand on one side of it, that's called the footwall. And then if you could hang a lamp on the other side, right, that's called the hanging wall. All right, so do you see, like the hanging wall is inclined like this, and the footwall is inclined like that, right? So because you could stand on it. It's actually, so what happens to the hanging wall is of great interest. Okay, so if the hanging wall rises, here, let's see if they show. Yeah, here we go. So if the hanging wall rises, so remember, so take a look at it, right? This just concentrate on the hanging wall. All right, so the other side is important. It's called the footwall, but the hanging wall, what the hanging wall is doing is what's important to us. So if the hanging wall rises, that's called a reverse fault. All right, so that's just what they call it. All right, so it's a reverse fault because the hanging wall is rising. Guess what? If the hanging wall is falling, that's a normal fault. All right, so see, here's the hanging wall. Here, let's go back to this picture. Right, hanging wall is that's in this particular case, that's the wall that is that's on the right hand side. If that rises, and of course the footwall is falling, but what I always just remember, whatever the hanging wall is doing is what's important. So if the hanging wall is rising, that's a reverse wall, which is kind of a weird way to think of it. But then if the hanging wall is falling, if it's